When we first moved to our new home in Texas, it felt like a fresh start, a chance to leave behind the chaos of city life and embrace the quiet comfort of the countryside. The house was everything we had hoped for: spacious, charming, and full of potential. It even had a room perfectly suited for our teenage daughter, Jean. We could tell she was excited about having her own space, a place where she could escape into her world of books, music, and daydreams. At first glance, the house seemed perfect, almost too good to be true. But there was something about it, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. It wasn't anything obvious, just a faint, nagging unease that lingered in the back of my mind. I told myself it was nothing, just the stress of the move, the exhaustion of settling into a new place. I brushed it off, ignoring that strange, uncomfortable feeling. After all, we had a new life to build here, and I wasn't going to let a few unsettled thoughts get in the way. It wasn't long after we settled and that strange things began to happen in Jean's room. At first, it was just little things that could be easily dismissed. A toy would suddenly fall off the shelf, making a soft thud on the carpeted floor. I checked to see if something had knocked it over, but nothing seemed out of place. I told myself it was probably just the way the toy had been positioned. Maybe it was too close to the edge, but it kept happening, and always in Jean's room. Then there were the windows. We would leave Jean's window closed, especially at night, but somehow it would be open the next morning. I'd ask her if she'd opened it, but she swore she hadn't. My husband suggested it was just the old window frame. Maybe it didn't latch properly, and a gust of wind pushed it open. We even started double-checking the latch before bed, but no matter how secure we made it, the window was always open by morning. We all tried to make sense of these occurrences, with logical explanations, shifting toys, faulty latches, the wind. But as these incidents continued, I could feel a growing discomfort deep inside me. I could see it in Jean too, though she tried to hide it. Despite the unsettling feelings creeping up on us, we clung to our rationalizations, refusing to acknowledge that something might be terribly wrong. Jean started to complain about not being able to sleep at night. At first, I thought it was just typical teenage restlessness, maybe anxiety from the move. But then she began to tell me about something much more disturbing. She said she felt a presence in her bed, like someone or something was lying next to her, watching her in the darkness. She couldn't see it, but she could feel it, an unsettling weight that made her skin crawl and her heart race. I could see the fear in her eyes, the exhaustion from nights spent lying awake, too terrified to close her eyes. I wanted to believe her, I really did, but the idea that something supernatural was at play seemed too far-fetched. I tried to comfort her, telling her it was just her imagination, a trick of the mind in an unfamiliar place. But deep down, I started to wonder if there was more to it, if maybe we were dealing with something beyond our understanding. As the nights grew more difficult for Jean, the atmosphere in our home began to change. Little annoyances between us that we used to laugh off turned into heated arguments. My husband and I found ourselves snapping at each other over the smallest things, and Jean became increasingly withdrawn. It was as if the very air in the house was charged with tension, pushing us apart, feeding off our fear and frustration. The harmony we had once enjoyed as a family was slipping away, replaced by a sense of dread that none of us could fully explain or escape. Desperation finally drove us to seek help. My husband and I couldn't bear to see Jean suffer any longer, and the strain on our family was becoming unbearable. We decided to consult a priest, someone who might understand what we were dealing with, if, in fact, it was something beyond the physical world. The priest we found was a kind, older man who listened patiently as we described the strange occurrences in our home, the escalating tension, and Jean's terrifying experiences. After hearing everything, the priest didn't hesitate. He told us, with a grave expression, that our house was being tormented by a malevolent force. He explained that this force didn't originate in our home, but from the house next door. The house had been vacant for years, left empty after the previous occupants, who had been deeply involved in dark rituals and black magic, had moved away. According to the priest, when they left, they had unleashed something, a presence that had been trapped in their home. Because of our proximity to that cursed house, The malevolent force had latched onto us, seeking to destroy our family, to feed off our fear, and to break us apart. The priest said it was no coincidence that we had moved into the house next to it. This evil had been waiting for new victims, for another family to torment and tear apart. His words filled me with a cold dread, but also a strange sense of relief. It was horrifying, but at least now we knew what we were up against. With the priest's help, we began the process of confronting the evil that had taken hold of our home. He started with intense prayer sessions, reciting powerful verses that seemed to make the very walls tremble. The atmosphere in the house grew heavier during these rituals, as if the malevolent force was resisting, fighting back against the light being brought into our home. The priest also performed spiritual cleansing rituals, going from room to room, blessing each corner, each door, each window, in an effort to drive out whatever darkness lingered there. The rituals weren't easy. The air felt thick with tension, and we could all sense something terrible thrashing against the priest's prayers, as if it didn't want to leave. But the priest was relentless, returning day after day, determined to banish the evil that had invaded our lives. Slowly, we began to feel a change. The house seemed lighter. The oppressive feeling that had settled over us began to lift. Jean started sleeping better, the strange occurrences stopped, and the constant arguments between us began to fade. After several sessions, the priest declared that the house had been cleansed. He assured us that the malevolent force had been driven out and that we were safe now. We were shaken, but relieved, and decided to stay in the house. It was our home, after all, and we didn't want to run from it. Life slowly returned to normal, and we tried to put the terrifying events behind us. But even as we resumed our daily routines, a small part of me couldn't shake the feeling that something still wasn't right. There was a lingering doubt in my mind, a shadow of uncertainty. We had been told that the danger was gone, but I couldn't help but wonder, were we truly safe? Or was it simply lying in wait, biding its time, ready to strike again when we least expected it? It was supposed to be an unforgettable night. My two closest friends and I had planned this trip to Florida for weeks. We were all excited to escape our routine and dive into the thrill of a big party. The atmosphere was electric as we got ready, laughing, dressing up, and talking about the fun we were going to have. One of my friends had brought her boyfriend along. He seemed nice enough, and since he offered to drive, we felt even more at ease. He didn't drink much, so we didn't have to worry about getting home safely. As the night unfolded, everything seemed perfect. The music was loud, the drinks were flowing, and we were all having the time of our lives. We danced, we laughed, we let go of all our worries. I remember feeling so carefree, surrounded by my friends, and knowing we had a reliable ride back. We trusted him completely. He was calm, responsible, and seemed genuinely concerned for our safety. In that moment, we had no reason to think that anything could go wrong. After the party, we stumbled our way back to the car, laughing and holding onto each other for support. We were all pretty drunk by then, and the world around us felt like a blur of lights and music. The boyfriend, as promised, took the keys and started driving us home. We didn't think twice about it. We trusted him, and we were too exhausted to even care about the details. As we left the city behind, I started to notice something felt off. The streets we were passing through didn't look familiar. At first, I thought maybe it was just the alcohol messing with my sense of direction, but the farther we drove, the more uneasy I became. I glanced over at my friends, but they were too out of it to notice anything wrong. One was slumped against the window, half asleep, while the other was humming to herself, oblivious to the world outside. A nagging feeling started to grow in the pit of my stomach, but I didn't say anything. I told myself it was just the alcohol, that I was overreacting. After all, he was her boyfriend. Why would he take us anywhere but home? But as the unfamiliar road stretched out in front of us, that small spark of doubt began to flicker into something darker. As we continued driving, the car grew quieter. My friends, slowly coming out of their drunken haze, started to look around, confusion dawning on their faces. We were on a deserted road, surrounded by nothing but darkness. No lights, no other cars, just endless stretches of empty highway. The realization hit all of us at the same time. We were nowhere near where we were supposed to be. The atmosphere in the car shifted instantly. What had once been a carefree ride back home now felt like a trap. I could feel the panic rising in my chest, and I wasn't alone. My friends exchanged nervous glances, and I could see the fear beginning to take hold. We were all thinking the same thing. This wasn't right. Something was very, very wrong. I looked over at the boyfriend, trying to read his expression, but he was calm, too calm. His hands gripped the steering wheel with a strange sense of purpose, like he knew exactly where he was going. There was no hesitation, no confusion on his part, which only made the situation more terrifying. We wanted to ask him what was happening, where he was taking us, but the words stuck in our throats. None of us dared to say anything, afraid of what his answer might be, or what he might do if he realized we were onto him. The car felt like a cage, and every mile we drove deeper into the unknown, the more trapped we became. Panic set in, and my mind raced, trying to figure out what to do. One of my friends, trying to stay calm, pretended to be more drunk than she actually was. She slurred her words, laughing loudly to keep up the act, while slowly reaching for her phone. She glanced at me, and I knew exactly what she was trying to do: call for help without him noticing. But he noticed. His eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, and the moment he saw her hand on her phone, his demeanor changed completely. The calm, quiet boyfriend was gone. In his place was someone cold and calculating. He swerved the car to the side of the road, and before any of us could react, he reached back and snatched the phone from her hand. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he snarled, his voice low and menacing. The car was at a standstill, and the only sound was the harsh breathing of my friends. We were terrified, and it was clear now that whatever intentions he had, they weren't good. The fear that had been building up inside us exploded into full-blown terror. We had to do something, anything. My friend closest to the door tried to yank it open, but it was locked. I fumbled for the handle on my side, but he hit the lock button before I could get out. The sense of being trapped was overwhelming. We started to scream, hoping that somehow someone would hear us, but we were in the middle of nowhere. There was no one around, no one to help us. The realization that we were completely at his mercy sent chills down my spine. We were desperate, terrified, and completely out of options. In the chaos, my friend managed to hit the call button on her phone before he snatched it away. We had no idea if the call went through, or if the police could even track us out here, but it was our only hope. We were stuck, terrified, and running out of options. Minutes felt like hours as we sat there, trapped in the car with him, trying to keep him calm while praying for a miracle. Suddenly, in the distance, we saw flashing lights, a patrol car, speeding down the empty road toward us. The moment he saw the lights, something changed in him. The cold, calculating look in his eyes flickered with fear. He knew it was over. He didn't even try to run. Instead, he slumped back in his seat, defeated, as the police pulled up behind us. The officers approached cautiously, guns drawn, ordering him to step out of the car. He complied without a word, hands raised, and was quickly taken into custody. The relief that washed over us was overwhelming, but it was mixed with a deep, lingering fear. We were rescued, yes, but the damage was done. Even with him in handcuffs, the terror of what could have happened haunted us. We were safe, but that night changed something in us. The memory of those long, terrifying minutes on that deserted road stayed with us, a constant reminder that the people we trust most can sometimes be the ones we should fear the most. The question of how close we came to disaster lingered in our minds, and even though he was gone, the fear wasn't. It was a wound that would take a long time to heal, if it ever did.